Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Kicking It here on the Quality Shot Tennis channel and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever else you might listen to this. We have waited a long time to give you a second episode, both fault of our own and also not fault of our own. We've been quite busy with things outside and inside of tennis, and also just because we tried to record this podcast 1 week ago, we recorded it, finished everything, and then the audio quality was just absolutely terrible. So it's taken us another week to get to the point where we can record it and here we are. But speaking of us being busy both on and off tennis topics, Alex has been very busy in terms of the world of tennis. So what have you been up to recently, Alex?
Yeah, no, it's been busy, but glad to be back speaking with you, Liam. But yeah, I've been away a little bit, and I think the big one for me was being at the UTS at the Copper Box in London. That was a couple of weeks ago now, so yeah, feels like a little while has gone by, and people are starting to head off to getting ready for that. But for that to end the season and to be there for it was pretty amazing. I was there for the media day, helping out the Amelia Group communications company who help out. The UTS. But yeah, it was great to see all the likes of Kokonakis, Demonor, um, all those lot sort of get together for a last sort of hurrah of the season. And yeah, good to see Demonor sort of get the win in that in those finals and get a nice little paycheck to end the season. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it's always nice for them to get a couple more paychecks in end of November, start of December. But so I went to the UTS in 2023. I'm not too sure if you were there. I believe you were there in 2023
Yeah.
as well. But you were there in 2020, this year, 2024. I wasn't there, but it seemed like it was a much better setup this year compared to last year. I felt like just even seeing the videos online, it certainly looked that it felt a little bit more intimate for the fans, a little bit more organized. Obviously, being in the Excel Arena, like we discussed last week, the
Mm.
smell of the horse show going on, not too far from the tennis, just wasn't the great mixture of consumer and consumer. It just wasn't the match. But yeah, what were your thoughts on that end?
Yeah, look, I think it was in a much better location in terms of being in its own stadium without the sort of hustle and bustle of everything else going on. And like you said, it was more intimate. I feel like you sort of come off the streets, just outside the Copper Box, and automatically you're straight into the arena. So it had that sort of feeling of just magnificence when you enter the building, which is really cool. I think they had their record attendance, so I
Mhm.
think that's just shows that how much every year on year and sort of UTS event by event, it's just growing and growing, and that's really good to see because I think it would have been easy for it to sort of just hit a bit of a stalemate, sort of couple of years into the event, but it's good to see that it's continuing to grow and it's probably going to continue and who knows, they could be playing in the likes of the O2 Arena before long. I think they're starting to stick to those venues that they know they can sell out just because it looks so
Yeah.
much better from sort of a marketing perspective, and then they can start to look to go into bigger stadiums. But I mean, the Copper Box is certainly not an arena to be to be looked over because it's huge. They've had Billie Jean King Cup ties there and stuff like that, so it's quality really.
And do you sort of think, it's you say that obviously a couple of years in now that they've sort of managed to keep the momentum going. If you compare last year's lineup of players against this year's lineup of players for the grand final, would you say the quality has dropped in terms of the names, or it's gone up? Because last year we had the likes of Diego Schwartzman, Jack Draper there. This year we didn't have them, but last year we also had Benoit Paire and Alexander Bublik. So it's
Mm.
like you had maybe higher quality, but also lower quality. What's your thoughts? And
Mm.
do you think they need to sort of get a few more big name players to really cement themselves as ticket sellers for sort of a venue like the O2?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, I think they do have a really good lineup of players. Like, there's no doubt about that. But whether they sort of the next step is to get one of the big four, like a Zverev, if they can get a Jock, of course, great. Someone like a Zverev or TFO. I know TFO's played it a couple of times.
And Medvedev would
Um,
be good because he's close to Moratoglu as well.
exactly. Yeah, that's a good shout. So I think you're right. If they are to go to that next step, they sort of need one of those players. But again, the lineup was quality. I mean, they had Demon, they had Morphis, who's sort of matches the style of UTS. I think that's sort of what they're going for as well. They want players that will buy into their ethos of let's do this for the fans. This is a tournament for the fans, and we're going to give you a good payday at the end of the day, but you're going to have to give us something back as well. So yeah, Demon, Bublik. I think Medvedev would match that style. So I don't think it will be long until we see him at an event. But yeah, I don't know how long do you reckon it is? Do you think till they can get the likes of Zverev getting involved?
To be honest, it's going to be tough because you know my thoughts on the off season in general. I think it's too short. And when you're talking at that level of player where it's like an Alcaraz, a Zverev, a Sinner, a Medvedev, these guys who, I know Djokovic, of course, but to be honest, I would never see Djokovic doing a UTS event. I think he doesn't need that paycheck. He's got enough paychecks coming in as it is, even if he sits on a beach in the Maldives. So it's really a question of how much do these players want to sacrifice their chances of going into the next season fresh, or also because to get to the grand final at the end of the season, you have to participate throughout the season to the other events.
Yeah,
So
I think there's one wild card that they can give, but everyone else has to, like you say, have to compete.
Yeah, exactly. So those players throughout the season aren't going to give up on the Masters, the Grand Slams, to sort of play a UTS in Frankfurt and Oslo and stuff like that. They're going to be focused more on the actual official events. So getting that access to the final of the UTS isn't really going to be possible unless Mouratoglou changes the rules, which of course he can, to have, okay, I'm going to have a 16 player field with 6 wildcards or something. And then it becomes a lot bigger of a tournament, and you can really put in the players that you want if you pay them enough. Speaking of that, what do you think in terms of, at the moment we're seeing a lot of exhibition tournaments going on. So we've had the UTS, you're having also the next gen finals. That's not an exhibition tournament currently. And you've got, the World Tennis League in Abu Dhabi right now. Do you think, and you had Alcaraz, in New York and in the Dominican Republic doing little exhibitions and participating in sort of events there. What are your thoughts on the off-season length, and are players just overexerting themselves when they should really sort of take a break?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, yes, it is too short and they need more of a break. But I can just sort of, that opinion comes from the fact that at the end of the season, you can tell that they're so done. And I think that probably, even if you have, I don't know, an extra 2-3 weeks long of an off season, I think they would still get to that point of sort of despair at the end of the season, like we saw Medvedev, holding the racket at the other side, trying to hit a return like that. Just things like that. That's just, to me, I think that's just overtiredness and just they're done. They need to stop. So that's a tough one. Would that change with an extra 2 weeks in the off season? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. But yeah, I think for sure they're trying to make the most of the time they have. Like Alcaraz, we've spoken about his willingness to play exhibitions, and whether that's in order to get his positive image out on display. I don't think it's to do with money really, because he's winning enough money sort of on the tour anyway. So yeah, it's so difficult. I don't know what I think, because every player is different, and I think they've got different different stages of the season and what they like doing. So yeah, it is a really difficult one. What are your thoughts on it? I know you have fairly strong, probably more stronger views than I do, because I'm still not sure.
I think these exhibition tournaments are great because it gives a lot more of a chilled vibe to tennis. You can interact more with the fans. It's not as serious, so people have a little bit more fun, and you don't actually have that stress of pushing your body to the limits. But I think it does add a toll on your body. But as you said, there's two different sides to it. If I look at it from an Alcaraz perspective, as you said, he's trying to improve his likeness. Is that even though he might not be getting the big checks that that say, okay, well, I'm doing these exhibitions, I'm getting X amounts, like as he did in Riyadh when they did the Six Kings Slam. Now that he's doing like the ones in New York, I'm sure they're not paying him the same amount. But if you look at someone like Rublev, who plays every tournament possible on the calendar tour anyways, and is currently at the World Tennis League. Is he ruining his chances of, starting the 2025 season well, because he didn't have that great of a 2024 season, or is he using it as a warm up to the 2025 season to find his level? Kyrgios is also at the World Tennis League, and he's using it as a warm up to find his level and see where his game is at before his comeback return. I believe it's going to be in Brisbane and then throughout the Australian Open. So there are different sides to it. I personally think that if you don't need to play these exhibition tournaments, like Sinner isn't doing that at the moment, I think you shouldn't. So I think it just really, you should, as a tennis player, you should probably focus on maximizing your chances to win official things. But then, I probably have, I'll be completely wrong if Alcaraz wins the Australian Open at the start of the 2025 season. But speaking of tournaments that are ongoing right now, which are not exhibitions, I sort of briefly mentioned it. It's the Next Gen Finals week currently, and to be honest, I've enjoyed watching the highlights so far of the week. João Fonseca has really sort of impressed me. I mean, he impressed me quite a bit earlier in the season, during the clay court season in Rio and all around there. He looked amazing. Haven't really seen too much of him for the rest of the 2024 season on the main tour. Here at the Next Gen ATP Finals, he's looked as good as possible. I was hoping to see a little bit better from Mensik in these matches. He sort of has disappointed a little bit. I'm not too sure. Also he had that issue of the doping test midway through his match, which just doesn't make any sense. But what are your thoughts on the Next Gen Finals this year?
Yeah, just quickly, I haven't looked into enough of that as I wanted to. What can you talk me through what actually happened there with the doping test?
I don't remember exactly who he was playing against, but he went to have a bathroom break, and I think he lost a few sets, a couple of those mini sets. Went to have a bathroom break, and then came back obviously a little bit later than the time allows usually, and then he goes to the umpire and he's complaining. He says the doping agency that they can check wherever you are whenever they want, and they can come to knock on your door, whatever time of the day. You always have to tell them where you are. And they, midway through the match, they were like, "Oh yeah, come and do a test now." And then so he had to go do the test, and then he had to get back on court to finish the match, which of course I believe he lost. Maybe I'm incorrect. I haven't been watching the matches live for the Next Gen ATP Finals, but I've been seeing the highlights. But I believe he lost that match. So it's very weird. I don't even think that's allowed. So it's just very much an unfair thing that happened to him, I find.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, I've never seen that happen before. I know they can get asked sort of anywhere, but I didn't anywhere anytime. But sort of during a match, that came as a surprise to me.
Especially when in tennis you don't have that much time between sets. Even if you do go to the bathroom, if you're playing like a football game or a basketball game, in the halves you usually have 15 minutes or something like that. So a little bit more time. But here you're talking about 2 minutes to go to the bathroom, 3 minutes if you're changing your clothes. Something I think the maximum you can get is like 7 minutes total. So adding a doping test onto that is just, it also gets you out of the zone, because in football, okay, fair enough, you've got 10 other teammates who can sort of make up if you've lost a little bit of concentration in those first 5-10 minutes when you get back onto the pitch. But in tennis, you're by yourself. So if you've got 5-10 minutes where you're not really focused on the game and you're trying to find your level again because you got distracted by something that's a bit unfair, especially in the Next Gen ATP Finals, you've lost 3 games, and to win a set you need 4 games. So it's a bit weird. But
crazy.
There's also been Rafa at the Next Gen Finals, and he's been socializing with the players. It's good to see him on doing some of these things. Do you think we'll be seeing him more throughout other tournaments in 2025? I know he's sort of a ambassador for tennis in that region for the Next Gen Finals, but do you think we'll see him at any other tournaments next year?
Yeah, probably. I think there's been clearly a trend with the guys that have been retiring that they can't stay away for too long. So for no doubt we'll see him at in Paris for Roland Garros. I reckon he'll be there for most of the fortnight, sort of watching matches. I reckon we'll see him dotted around. It wouldn't surprise me if he's at Laver Cup with Feds. I reckon they'll probably make a little appearance together. Obviously, Feds will no doubt be there. I think it's San Francisco next year, the Labour Cup.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that'll be a little trip for him. Yeah, I don't know. Difficult to know, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we see it quite a lot.
Do you think so? Obviously, and I'll delve into to sort of my Rafa retirement sort of being there
Yeah, yeah,
soon. But do you think that he will? I reckon there will be a Roland Garros farewell because they didn't do it this year. He
mm,
asked them not to do it, of course, because he still hadn't officially made up his mind whether he was retiring this
yeah,
year or not at that point. So he had asked them not to do that just in case he felt
mm,
there was a chance of him coming back. Now,
yeah.
obviously, there's no chance of him being a player there anymore. Do you think they'll do a big celebration of him? I think that would be the best farewell place for him.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I think we spoke about this sort of last week, that I felt that there wasn't as much of a scene made for his retirement as there was for Rogers and Andy. So I think that would sort of equal it out and balance it out with sort of a nice ceremony at Roland Garros next year. I think that would be would be a really nice gesture, and sort of make it a bit more even, I think.
No, for sure. I think as you said, the coverage wasn't as prominent, of course, just because of the fact that it's not an official, like the Davis Cup was not an official ATP event.
Yeah,
So all
exactly.
those socials didn't have as much freedom on the content that they showed. And
Mm,
the Davis Cup marketing isn't as prominent as the ATP Tour on social media.
yeah,
I was there for his last match. It was sort of mixed feelings in terms of like, you're there, you want Rafa to win, but then Rafa loses. So you're like, okay, well, if Alcaraz wins his second match, which he did, it's 1-1 in the
mm,
tie, and then you want to sort of see Spain do well because it allows Rafa to sort of potentially get closer to the finals of the Davis Cup and potentially win it, and that would be a great way for him to retire. But
yeah,
then also on the other hand, you're there like, oh well, if Spain does lose this doubles, I'll be there for Rafa's actual retirement, and I
mm,
will have seen his last ever professional tennis match. So it was sort of a bittersweet moment, but I think the ceremony was well done. There was a lot of people there. Both obviously the Spanish and the Dutch team were there. They presented him with trophies and pictures, and they had loads of speeches from legends of every different sport you could imagine. I
mm,
do feel like, you know, it was a very sad but also happy thing because he's given everything he could to the sport. There's not really much you could add on top of his resume.
mm,
And when you think about it, he's the player who I think he's missed like 18 Grand Slams throughout his career, and he's second on the all-time list
yeah,
of Grand Slams in terms of out of the big three. So when you compare him to Roger and Novak, you could say he potentially had the highest potential in terms of Grand Slam total wins
mm.
compared to a Djokovic who's only missed like 3 Grand Slams. So I feel like it was a very well deserved sort of farewell, but there definitely should be more throughout 2025.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember there's a quote from Uncle Tony where he said, "Yeah, sort of if Rafa had been fit for all this, for all of his career, there's no doubt he'd be up the top above Djokovic." So yeah, you can sort of see his point, which
Yeah.
the Djokovic fans won't like me saying.
I'm not too sure we want to get into who's the best one debate just
No, no, we're
because
not getting into that.
there will never be a right answer. And
No.
even me just saying there will never be a right answer will annoy someone in the comments
Yeah.
or listening.
Yeah.
But after that, I wanted to, speaking of, the big three, Djokovic has had some big news going into the off season. New coaching partnership with Andy Murray. We spoke about this last week, but we didn't obviously get to post that podcast, so we're speaking about it again. I said that it's exciting times because it's something new, it's something fresh. You'll give him maybe a little bit more motivation, a little bit more spark and energy going onto court for Djokovic. But it will also be an interesting dynamic in terms of the relationship, any tension there, just because of the fact that Djokovic is known for being quite aggressive at times with his team vocally during matches. So I'm not too sure how Murray is going to take that, because especially at this point in Novak's career, there's going to be a lot more losses in big moments in big finals than there are going to be wins. I gave an example last week, just saying, if he had five big finals next year, you
Mm,
you could probably say he would lose 3 of them if he's facing the
mm,
likes of Alcaraz and Sinner, and you could probably win 2. you would just put that fair estimate on there. Obviously, he could win more, he could win less, but just to say a fair estimate, I would say 2 and 3 would probably be the record there. So what are your thoughts going into that for sort of that partnership and any tension out of that?
Yeah, I think, again, sort of we touched on it a bit last week, but I think this echoes a lot of other people's opinions that I've heard speak about it, is that it's sort of it's a win-win for both of them, because Djokovic hasn't been winning obviously as much as he has done in his career last year, and so if that carries on, okay, Murray hasn't quite the appointment of Murray hasn't quite done what it was hoped to have done, but image-wise, it's so good for Djokovic because automatically he's brought over so many fans from Andy Murray.
Yeah.
There will be loads more people supporting Djokovic simply because of that partnership. And in turn, I personally think that's going to help him, because he as much as he doesn't or uses the fact that when crowds are against him, he uses that well. I think really he wants them on his side. So I only think that's going to bring about good things on court. In terms of Djokovic sort of having that tendency to sort of have a go at his team, that'll be an interesting dynamic. But I think I said last week, and my opinion is that they would have had those conversations beforehand, and Murray will be happy to accept that, I think. And also he's been in that position as well. He knows what it's like to have a go at his team. So I think he'll understand that more than most. But it tends to be that coaches are pretty good at dealing with that. They are at the beck and call of their players. So they're fairly happy to take that on board. I guess as long as their player puts in the work, they don't mind that happening. So yeah, I'm so excited to see how it plays out. But yeah, and I'm so excited to be there, to be there, sort of hopefully watching or doing some work on the same matches as Djokovic. That'd be unbelievable, wouldn't it?
That would be great, and I think so. You'll be there for the Australian Open, but I think Djokovic kicks off his season in Brisbane, both in the singles and in the doubles. He will be doing the doubles with Nick Kyrgios, and Nick Kyrgios has been quite vocal in recent times, as if he's never been quite vocal. Big shock. About Yannick, wanting to face Yannick Sinner at the Australian Open, and sort of lack of respect, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into it because it's not really the topic I want to touch on here. But he's been vocal about these doping issues, and we've seen this Swiatek doping issue as well throughout this off season. What are your thoughts on the fairness of treatment of players? Last week I spoke about Simona Halep and how she basically lost her career because of it, but then because of the fact that she wasn't able to trace what actually happened, because hers was a lot more difficult to trace to where she got contaminated accidentally, whilst Iga Swiatek and Yannick Sinner were able to trace it much faster because it was a much simpler process scientifically. I'm not a scientist, so I can't really go into too much detail on it. Do you think it's fair that one person's career gets ruined and then two others, because they're number ones or number twos in the world, don't really see much of a punishment?
Yeah, well, it is an interesting one with the Halep case, because a lot of the chat that's coming up at the moment and the sort of disparity of treatment between those high ranked players to those lower ranked is money, and the fact that they had the money to hire the best lawyers that can then find the issue or the contamination quicker, and therefore they don't have to release that information to the public, and therefore they have more time and all that stuff. But whereas Halep, she would have had the money. She was a top 5 player back when she. So that is an interesting one, and maybe that's the reason that she wasn't treated like, or she was treated like Sinner and Swiatek, but there was an obvious reason that she got banned. So yeah, again, I don't know enough around it. Like you say, we're not scientists, so we don't know the specifics. But certainly the argument with the low ranked players and the top ranked players, there needs to be some sort of ATP/WTA lawyer that they can go to that is going to treat everyone the same. And it may be that every player has to use them. It has to use that group of lawyers, because it is unfair that
Yeah.
Sinner can hire any lawyer he wants. And I could give the example of Tara Moore. She obviously can't because she's lower ranked and not quite having the same amount of income. So that to me is something that needs to be done.
No, I never even thought of it that way. I think that's actually a very, very good point. I don't think there should be just one. I think it should be like a collective lawyers that are always on call that for these sort of situations, and they're paid the same no matter what. And they need to be top notch lawyers to make sure that they have the best sort of ability to fight these if they are obviously unfair allegations. Whether they actually do that, how they finance that, etc., etc. I mean, I'm sure the ATP Tour can finance it. They got enough money going around. The WTA Tour might struggle a little bit more, but if the merger happens of both tours, then it should help. But that would actually be a great idea for it to happen. But yeah, no, those are sort of the topics we wanted to cover on this podcast. I think it's going to be interesting going into the 2025 season if Nick Kyrgios does face Jannik Sinner. I mean, I'd love to see that match. I would love for it to be a 5-setter. I'm not going to say who I'd want to win, but I'd probably like to see Sinner win just because Kyrgios has been quite rude about this whole situation. There's ways you can go about speaking about this rather instead of being rude and disrespectful to your fellow players. So I'd like to see Sinner win that match, but I'd also like just to see the match in general and how it plays out. And we did mention last week that we had basically messed up our entire predictions for the ATP and WTA finals. I believe I had said Sabalenka for the WTA and Alexander Zverev for the ATP. And you had said
Alcaraz and Goff.
Yes. So exactly. So you had gotten one right. So basically, we were going to start selling our predictions to you guys just so if you have a 25% success rate, you definitely won't lose any money. Yeah, you're doing all right. But better than most. But no, on that topic, thanks for listening, guys. Hopefully this time the podcast actually goes out, and we'll try and be a little bit more on a consistent schedule throughout 2025. It's been a bit of a hectic end of the year, but no, it's exciting times for tennis, and hopefully we see some great matches to start the season from every player that we've talked about so far on the pod, but also hopefully we see some new surprise faces on the tour, especially if we see João Fonseca do amazing stuff next year on the tour. That'd be great, because I think in a few years' time we'll be talking about him as a top 10 player. On the basis of that, anything else to say, Alex?
No, I just think we've got a very exciting 2025 season coming up, and also on the pod, this was just a little teaser. So there's going to be so much more in 25.
Yeah, no, but thanks for listening, guys, and let us know obviously in the comments if you have any questions, any thoughts. We'll go, whenever we get something, we'll go into it in the podcast, and hope everyone has a great holiday season, and thanks for listening.